Hi, everybody. Good morning. I'm Terry Henney from WSGW Radio, farm broadcaster, and we are talking beans. Along with me this morning is the executive director of the Michigan Bean Commission, Joe Kramer. Joe, good morning. How are you this morning?
I'm doing all right, Terry. Thank you.
Hey, a little chilly weather on tap for us here the next few days.
Yeah, we've kind of had our share and probably could use more moisture and some heat, and everybody would be a whole lot happier.
You know, we did pick up a little bit of rain, and I think when we switch to Lou and to Caleb here in just a moment or two, they might be able to tell us they got a little bit more rain, and they're pretty happy with it right now.
Yeah, I'm anxious to hear from them. Maybe we should welcome Lou in here with us. I don't know if Caleb's logged on yet or not, but good morning, Lou.
Good morning, guys. How are you?
All is well.
We're doing great. We're doing great. We were just talking about the rain. Now, I don't know, Joe, in your rain gauge over in the Frankenmuth area, a half inch maybe?
Tops. Yeah, a little shy of that probably.
I know my rain gauge I had, somewhere between 4/10 and 45 hundredths there of an inch. But that's about it. Now, from what I saw, Lou, over in Michigan's Thumb, because you're at the cooperative elevator up in the Pigeon area, it looked like you had a few more systems hanging over the area.
Yeah, I would guess we got a little bit more than that, but I'm ashamed to admit my rain gauge is still safely in my garage. That's so I need to get it out. But yeah, it's definitely been wet here a couple days, and we certainly needed it. Now a little bit of heat, I think, would be awfully nice. So
now we welcome Caleb, and Caleb, good morning. We're talking rain gauges. Now Lou says he's really conservative here. He doesn't want it to freeze up. But is this a gold-plated rain gauge, Lou, that you're worried about?
It's just lack of thought, lack of planning. I need to get it out where I can see it.
How much in your gauge, Caleb? What have you been seeing lately?
Sure. I mean, we've been anywhere between a quarter and a half an inch of rain the last couple of rain events. So we've had, I'd say some pretty good weather here locally, I think, to start the season. Obviously, we probably need some warmer weather. We had some cold spells, I think, that set some of the early planted crops, like sugar beets, back quite a bit, caused some issues and maybe had some replants. But, for the most part here, I think we've had a nice year. And I think we're going to go into this, at least soil moisture-wise, on a good start. But obviously just need some heat here and some good opportunities, I think, to catch up. I don't think we're behind planting. I'm not sure what we're at pace-wise, Lou, with the USDA, but I think generally speaking here, we're probably need some a little bit of catch-up time.
Yeah, as far as that crop progress report, I was amazed. And Joe, I think you probably, if you saw it, were amazed too. And, we'll be talking beans here in just a moment, but obviously with the beans comes the beets. And sugar beets, almost 100% of the beet acreage was reported in the ground, compared to like 50% is the 5-year average. I would imagine there's going to be some replanting going on, but I am just totally blown away with that number.
It's big. I think it'd be interesting if we could break out the Thumb and Saginaw Valley for corn and soybean progress as well as compared to the whole state, because I have a hunch we're well ahead of the state average. But hey, you guys, before we go any further, take a minute and introduce yourselves, will you? So our listeners know where you're from and what you do and what you're all about. Caleb.
I'll go first. I'm Lou DeGrant from the Co-op Elevator. I've been in the industry about 15 years, and I'm obviously still working from home here. I work in our grain marketing department, really contacting growers and helping them contract and hopefully make sense of these markets, which I'm not sure I can even make sense of anymore at this point. So.
Yeah, no, very good, Lou. My name's Caleb Sumblad. I work here with Co-op Elevator as well. I'm the dry bean and specialty crop marketing manager. I guess it's my title now. It's kind of a mouthful, but I've been with the co-op for just over 5 years, about 5.5 years now. Like Lou, I worked with the grain marketing side, so buying and originating grain and managing contracts with our growers. And now I'm on the dry bean side, where I've gotten to work with Joe, Michigan Bean Commission quite extensively, and work with our growers both on originating beans, and also on the out market side, selling beans and managing our program here. So I am working back from the office now, and surprisingly enough, I was the one with technical difficulties this morning, so I apologize for that. But we're all up and running now, so it's good to be here.
I'm kind of curious, guys. Caleb, Lou, as far as planting is concerned, probably one of the main reasons why so many growers got their plants started early this year was the soil texture. That ground really worked up nice, didn't it?
Yeah, the guys I'm talking to are telling me that conditions were really good for planting. I know a lot of people worried about this cold weather here over the next, 5 or 6 days. But yeah, I've heard a lot of good reports, and just driving around, I mean, it seems like there are a lot of fields done. I'm surprised to see there must be a fair amount of soybeans done, because I've seen a lot of fields rolled flat or guys rolling fields. So progress is really fast here.
Yeah, and I think we had a nice fall too. I think we got a lot of fall tillage work in, as opposed to a year like 2019, coming out of the fall of 2019, which is
sugar beet harvest.
Yeah, exactly. And all the challenges that went along with that. I don't think we got as much of progress on field work coming out of 19 into 20, whereas out of 20 into 21, I think we had a much easier time getting some work done. So I think that's helped as well.
You got a few growers on the Bean Commission board there, Joe. What have they been telling you so far at the meetings, if they've attended the meetings?
Well, we actually have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow, and if it rains a little bit, we might actually have a quorum. So we'll see what happens. But I think the guys have made great progress. They're watching their sugar beets like we've talked about. I think some of them have some fields or some small acreages that they need to replant. But I know a couple of them are done with sugar beets. They're done with corn. They're done with soybeans. And one of the things I wanted to talk to these two guys about, the reason I picked them is, the little tug of war that dry beans always have with corn and soybeans, and maybe on occasion wheat. How are we going to get farmers who have everything done on the 3rd of May, 5th of May, whatever we're at today, happy Cinco de Mayo, I guess. How are we going to get them to just sit still for 3 weeks and wait to put some dry beans in the ground when Chicago says plant corn, plant soybeans? And Caleb or Lou, maybe I'll direct that to you first to help a bean guy, help an amateur grain guy here understand what's going on in both current crop and then nearby new crop and long-term new crop.
Sure. So from a bean guy, I don't know that I'm going to be a lot of help for your cause here. So I tease Caleb every day about the price of black beans and where we could go. But overall, I'm really bullish on this market. I think if we just do the supply and demand math on corn and soybeans, it paints an awfully bullish story. When we combine in things like South America's corn crop, specifically Brazil, really off to a really tough start down there, it just creates a really bullish story. There is zero room for error on U.S. corn and soybean production this year. As we look, I wrote a couple notes this morning. December corn up $1.30 since the March 31st low. Corn. So the one thing that really surprised me this week, and maybe you guys have noticed too. So Monday afternoon, we got a planting report. Corn 46% planted versus a 5-year average of 36. Last year we were at about 48. Soybeans 24% planted on an 11% 5-year average. So I saw that Monday night, and I was like, oh, that's nice. We'll have a really chilled out Tuesday morning. Markets will be down, and that is not at all what we saw. In the last, just this week since Monday, corn up 24 cents, beans up 33 cents. And that's where I'm saying this market doesn't make a lot of sense. And I think that supply and demand math is just overwhelmingly bullish. And most people think that those carryout numbers are overinflated and that the USDA has some demand issues in there that they have to address. Next week, a week from today, we get another monthly supply and demand report, and some folks think that they'll finally realize some of the soybean demand. So, when you look at that in and of itself being that bullish, and then you further extrapolate out all this Chinese demand that we didn't have a couple years ago, you look at this drought map. This drought map is lit up in a way we haven't seen it in a very long time. And it's lit up in some really key places. And now I'm seeing weather forecasts, and Terry may speak a little more to this. I'm seeing weather forecasts for the entire country that aren't agriculture related. They're just like this your summer recreation forecast. Mm-hmm. And most places it's really hot and really dry. I saw a forecast from Michigan a few weeks ago saying drought out west is going to lead to a hot, dry summer for Michigan. And so now we have non-ag people talking about how hot and dry things are. And I think it really gets my attention. I don't know. It's hard to find something bearish to say about this right now. And that's the only thing that makes me bearish is how there's nothing out there. It makes me nervous.
I guess I'm kind of curious, Lou, because the last time we saw prices this high, and it was higher, sure, you had to go back to the drought year of 2012, from what I understand. And that was at a different time of the year as well. That was in the late summer, in the early fall, or we came right out of the gate, the beginning of the year, with all of this activity. And I guess that's what's probably adding to the mystery of all of this, is that the time of the year isn't normal.
Right.
All the cards aren't stacking up here. Who's got the poker face, and who really is holding the cards? Do we know?
I don't think we know. I think we're going to see this kind of continued volatility with probably a more bullish slant to it. Until we get to the middle of summer and find out a crop on corn and soybeans has or hasn't been made. Like I said, there's no room for error. The thing with soybeans, we know South America just raised an awfully big crop, and we know in a few months they're going to plant a big pile of acres. So you always have South America to bail out the soybean story a couple times a year. Corn, we are the game, and there is, like I said, there's no room for error. You look at that 1.3 billion bushel carryout, at where this demand is on ethanol and exports, and we're hearing livestock operators. I heard a story this week about a livestock organization buying a train full of wheat for feed, not a train car of wheat, a unit train of wheat for feed. So they're actually, it looks like they're trying to get ahead of what they see as a big rationing story coming at them. Yeah. Should have our attention.
I think, Lou, one of the things to add to your conversation on the grain prices that I've noticed is, what happens here as prices get so high? Do we start seeing a rationing of demand from both feed operations, dairy operations? At what point do these prices push just so high, $7 or $8 bushel corn, that we start to lose demand and trim down some of that, especially on the feed side? I do think the biggest factor here that you've really, really seen push these prices higher, and is probably legit, but it still has for many years been this unknown, is China, right? They've stepped in and more aggressively this year than any of the years past recently bought U.S. corn. They allegedly hold over half the world's corn. There's long been this discussion about what exactly that stock situation is, what the quality is. If they do hold all this corn, why are they stepping in and buying corn from the U.S.? Soybean exports to China and the increase there. I think that's really what set this off, because if you look at production last year in the U.S., it wasn't like we had an off year at all. We harvested a record amount in South America. Yeah, there's some concern about the crop down there. I do agree with your comments on potential drought this year has already started that story. But you're exactly right, Terry. This is very early in the season. In
Right.
most places, I mean, we're only 46% planted on corn. The crop isn't even in the ground yet. And it doesn't look like we're going to have massive delays either. So that story is kind of fading out.
Right.
Normally, we see every July, even on years where the stock situation was 2+ billion bushel carry out of corn, we would see prices in July spike when it was hot and dry in Iowa or Illinois, and there'd be some sort of concern. We'd get the price up a few cents. So that still is yet to come. And I think a lot of this is, if that happens and if these cards line up, just how high can this price go? But I think the number one thing to remember here is at some point we potentially could lose demand, and how much does that slow us down? Plus, a lot of this run up, especially lately, Lou, you mentioned this week, look, the fundamentals here look kind of bearish this week. The technicals, I think, have really played a lot into this. And that's something, we're certainly not technical trading experts, but if you look at a lot of these trading charts, there's been a lot of money coming into grains here. It seems like you've passed prices now where it's become sort of the hot market to put money into commodities, especially with volatility of equities, things like that, right? So you got a lot of things going on out there beyond just the true supply and demand fundamentals of this year. So
let me ask a question, right? I'm just obviously I want to think about how this all ties together and affects dry beans, and I'm curious. I'm curious about farmer participation, and how does a farmer manage, whether it's dry beans or grain, how does a farmer take advantage of this market and manage risk in this market? And I guess I'm just wondering, Lou, if you're bullish on the market, how do you talk to a grower about grains? And Caleb, how do you encourage dry bean production? Right, the speculator in me from the years I've been around the bean business, this looks, the more bullish this corn and soybean story is, it's almost like the more opportunity you have in dry beans, because the whole world is going to move toward corn and soybeans.
Right.
Or am I wrong about that? I guess I'm just, we use the old adage, live your life like a salmon. You're swimming against the river all the time. And I think this might be that opportunity, but what are you telling growers? What are they doing?
What I'm telling guys, these are prices we have not seen in a long time. And I hear growers, and I use this term respectfully, but they have whined for years about, if I just had $4 corn, I can make a bunch of money, and now here we're at new crop corn this morning at $5.40, and guys are telling me it's too cheap. And as bullish as I am, I would tell guys, take risk off the table. $5.40 corn pays a lot of input costs on corn. Let's get some of those input costs covered. Hope we did it too early, but pay the bills. Same thing. I've been saying this on beans since $11, and now we're at $13.07 this morning. We have to take risk off the table. As bullish as we are, we have to be disciplined and keep making sales. And that has been tough for some guys. There is no doubt on that. I think oftentimes growers' marketing plan is to do the opposite of the last big mistake they made. Last year, that big mistake was selling soybeans right off the combine, and who would have known that we would have this kind of rally over the winter? But I would tell guys to take a disciplined approach, know what their costs of production are, and be selling a little bit along the way. And at these values, as bullish as I am, I still probably get done planting this season a little more sold than I normally am at these values.
Well, and to flip that around then to beans, Joe, to your point, to dry beans, it's a little bit difficult, I think, from the dry bean grower perspective, because, the way to manage risk on your grain side is to just go out there and either forward contract, which, you can see the price every day. You can look at the Chicago Board of Trade and know which way the market's headed, right? You can manage risk yourself. You can take, a hedge position. You can trade in options markets that allow you some more flexibility. So there's lots more ways, I think, to manage risk almost instantaneously. And I forget how many.
Maybe we lost them.
Oh, that
No,
figures.
There he
Sorry
is.
about that. We're
He's-
back. I apologize.
You
Anyways,
must have said something. You must have said something that hit a hot button there somewhere.
Yeah,
'cause
yeah,
it-
exactly. No, no, but I apologize. So, anyways, no, I think again, you have a lot more ways to manage risk on the grain side. You can go and see the prices almost instantaneously. Forget how many hours a day the market trades, but it's open. You can wake up at 11 o'clock at night and see what the price of soybeans is in
Sure.
Chicago, right? Where on the dry bean side, we're having to constantly go out and basically find the markets as we're able to sell these beans and to backfill it and go to the grower and be able to have prices that will support them producing beans. I will say, for me, the thing that I would tell a grower is, look, as quickly as this grain market's come up, it can go down just as fast. The influences on Chicago are way outside of your control. I forget, it's over half of the trades done on the Board of Trade now are done not by human beings clicking a thing, but by algorithmic traders, right? So a lot of this is done beyond the scope of regular supply and demand fundamentals and just by technical trading. So as quickly as this thing can look good, certainly I agree. And we've talked about why I believe the markets are bullish on grains.
Right.
But, if you wait and if you are, not exercising some of those ways to take risk off the table, to manage risk, this thing could certainly turn around quickly, especially because, production is influenced both in South America as well as the U.S. Those acreage numbers that the USDA reported could certainly change, as you mentioned, Joe.
Well, and they will.
Yeah, and they will, right? I think those numbers from a perspective to an actual planting are going to switch very much this year. So what we've seen in beans is a consistent higher price here now, really since, I'd say the end of harvest of 2019, when we ran into production issues in the Mindac region, and then going into the spring of 2020 as the pandemic hits. We see prices and demand for beans jump tremendously. And then we see some production issues across the globe, right? We see smaller production in places like Argentina and Mexico. And now we see the demand push for beans from the U.S. increase and stay very, very high. And our production, while we harvested and we planted, close to, if not on all classes, record production, specifically in Michigan last year, the demand's been such that we've used up a lot of that. So yes, I think naturally this year you could see a rebalancing. So we won't plant record acres 2 years in a row. I mean, there's only so many acres to plant.
Right.
And certainly on grains, if the price is much more attractive, you're going to cut some of those acres. But the market is still going to be there for beans. And I don't see right now, my comment to growers is, I don't know what your downside is on beans. Your downside on grain, you really don't know what it is because it could turn around tomorrow. But as somebody who's in the market every day on dry beans, I can tell you, I don't think your downside is very high. I mean, if you look at all of our carryout estimates, our supply and demand numbers, especially our estimates on demand from last year, the exports from the U.S. on all classes of beans, the domestic consumption on black beans and how high it was last year. And again, the general trend continuing to grow. I mean, that's why I'll fight to get my bean acres in the ground, because if I'm a grower,
Sure.
I know that market is firm. And again, I'm not influenced as much as by what somebody's doing in Iowa and Illinois. Whereas if I'm, a bean producer, it's a much smaller group of production area that I have to be concerned about.
So let me ask though, because here locally we're competing with corn and beans, but beans. Sure. In the big picture of dry beans, our competition is out in Mindac area. And that's like the heart of a lot of this drought in the northern part of the country. What do you think that means for local guys? What's going on out west?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's a
great question.
Yeah.
I'm perfect with this.
Yeah, right. Well, it's something we've talked a lot about, internally, Lou, between myself and you about what we're seeing out there. I mean, in general, what we're hearing is, it's early yet to get too concerned, right? Yeah, they're planting corn and soybeans out there, but they're still a few weeks away from putting beans in the ground. It has kind of crept up on us though with continued drought conditions. I'd say, it's certainly something that has concerned the market and has allowed us to maintain, some premiums on those classes that are grown heavily out there. So far, I don't really see yet that we're super concerned that we're going to lose a bunch of production, right? There is some talk that, hey, maybe they'll plant more grain out there because, it's easier to insure that crop. And if there is significant losses because we're planting into drought, we'll kind of play the crop insurance game, maybe plant some more corn. But on the flip side, it's easier to plant beans into drought conditions because you plant beans with more soil moisture. And so I don't really have a good read yet on how it's going to affect acres, but I can certainly tell you there's concern, and yeah, there's drought conditions. But you talk to people on the ground out there, it's not as a dire concern as maybe you could hear some reports of. So
I guess I'm just kind of curious, how early can you plant beans comfortably here in Michigan? Because again, the point right toward the beginning is, hey, we're going to ask these guys to sit for 3 weeks before. And then the other thing is, all right, let's keep an eye on Mindac. The chances are they're going to be putting beans in the ground before we put beans in the ground. So we're going to have a little bit better read on how many acres they're going to put in before we make a decision. And another scenario, wheat.
Yep.
Wheat crop here in Michigan has taken off like a shot. And this weather, quite frankly, has been, I would say, pretty ideal growing. There is a little concern maybe, within the stages that we're at, we don't want to get any colder weather than what's in the forecast. But there's a real good chance that wheat harvest is going to be earlier this year, given all the conditions so far. Does that mean late planted beans here in Michigan after the wheat is off? How late can you go? So, yeah, the acres, that's, talk about volatility.
Sure. Well,
That's the word to describe this whole scenario all spring.
Terry, I think the calendar will suggest that that's a possibility, right? And we've seen guys do it before. Some of my friends in the wheat industry, they're determined that they predict we're going to have a fair amount of wheat harvest in the month of June. So it's an opportunity, but moisture is the key, right? If you have moisture, you can get away with it. If it's dry, like maybe the scenario that Lou pointed out, hot and dry in Michigan, that really tempers that opportunity, I guess. But it's going to be interesting. I guess the bottom line here is it's a great time to be in ag, whether you're in Michigan or not. Great opportunities for growers to make some money and take advantage of this upside. The bankers seems like the bankers would be happy.
Well, I think they're pretty happy, but the key to all this that I'm gathering from all of you is we have to keep talking. We have to communicate. We got to keep up on this because things could turn the snap of a finger. And what I'm gathering from Caleb is with the dry bean market, you're taking a little bit of that volatility out of the pricing structure, where right now we are looking at extreme volatility in a lot of our ag commodities. And I guess I got to ask you both, what are the contracts looking like these days? Are these producers thinking ahead, short term, long term? What are they doing right now, Lou?
I would say on corn, on wheat, for both the wheat in the ground now and for 22 wheat, there is a large amount of contracting done. Guys have been more disciplined the last few years at seeing $6 is a really key line on the futures. And we're well above that right now for 21 and 22 wheat. Corn and soybeans for 21, I would think there's a fair amount done, maybe not as much as there should be, but there's some done. 22 to 2022 corn and soybeans, there's been just a very little bit of interest, and I would tell guys, if you don't want to sell at these values, I talked to a grower the other day and painted the story like we just talked about here. And I said, but you still got to be disciplined and sell some. We got a chance to sell some at 520. And he says, but what I'm hearing is you saying I'm bullish, I shouldn't sell. And I go, no, that's not what I'm saying at all. If you don't want to sell at these values, I get it. But you should have a plan on where to sell. And that's what I asked that guy is, where's the corn price you do start selling? Is it 550? Is it 570? Is it $6? And, his answer is, I don't know. And I think if you're going to sit back and wait and see what this market does, by the time you decide to do something, it may be down the $1.30 that it's made in the last 6 weeks. And guys need to be disciplined and ahead of this thing and have a plan to get selling some. And for 22 as well, these are values, December 21 corn futures are 588 right now. December 22 are 515 right now. 515 certainly seems cheap, but if we look historically, that 515 is probably in the top 25% of December corn futures for the last 4 or 5 Decembers at this time of year. Be disciplined, look for opportunities, talk to whoever you sell grain to, and make a plan.
You don't have to do it all at once, do you?
You do not have to do it all at once. I tell guys that all the time, and this is a year with all this volatility. Maybe if you sell normally in 5,000 bushel increments, maybe this year with all this volatility, you sell in 2,000 or 3,000 bushel increments and get a lot more chances at a lot more little shots. But have a plan, be selling.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the same, I think it's the same idea on edible beans this year. I'd say so far, it's been 50-50, right? I think early on the contracting was a little bit more aggressive. Again, we came out of a year with record production and, certainly I think the fear was we could see prices really decline. But as demand picked up, we've seen these prices steadily increase. As the grain prices have run up now, we've seen prices steadily increase. And I think, again, early contracting activity was pretty active. Now it's really gotten slow. And again, as prices continue to increase, there becomes less and less of a desire for growers to contract. So I will say, as Lou mentioned, my advice to growers has been, as these contracts have continued to come out, again, take small pieces. On the bean side, as opposed to the grain side, we typically contract in acres, which is a little bit easier to make, I'd say. We're able to more easily decide how much of our percentage of our production. On grain, you kind of have a guess based on how much you're going to produce, but on beans with acres, exactly, if I'm going to grow 500 acres and I do, a fifth of my production, I'm going to contract 100 acres today. So that's kind of been my advice, is let's take chunks as we go. Certainly even at these prices today, where the bean contracts have on some classes top $40, which again, historically, very rarely do we see those numbers. I would still,
particularly this early.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I would still say it's probably not time to go out and do all my acres there, because there is so much unknown. And so I think Lou and I, on both the grain and the bean side, we've kind of gotten the same feelings. Is look, in sort of uncharted territory here. There's no reason, I think, to make decisions that are, way too rash. I think you just got to stay within yourself, be disciplined, and know your cost of production. And I think that's what we've seen growers do pretty effectively here this year.
Yeah. The other thing I would add, back on this being disciplined and not to harp on it, but I remember in 2012 and 13, when guys said corn will never be below $5 again. Like, corn is always going to be $5. And I mean, there were guys, a lot of people even in the industry, who agreed with that. And there were a lot of growers who then, when corn got to $4.50 and they had a chance to contract it, went, no, it's going back to $5. It's always got to be $5. And it doesn't always have to be $5. Last year at this time, corn we were planting was worth $2.80. And historically, that's way closer to average. It's the market doesn't have to do what you want it to do. That's not how this works at all. So
Can't outguess it, can you?
No.
Boy, I guess not. Guys, thank you very much for all your insight. This has been fun. It's hard to believe that the time has flown by as fast as what it has. But you two got to get back to work, right?
Yes.
Caleb, Lou,
Very
take care.
much.
Thank you
Thanks,
very
guys.
much for being a
Thank
part
you,
of
guys.
Talking Beans. We'll see you again, all righty? And
Maybe
Joe
we'll do it
Kramer?
again in July, Terry.
Oh, yeah. As a matter of fact, I think we're going to record this session, okay?
Compare
Because
notes.
Don't record it.
Thank you, guys.
It's
See you guys.
always,
Thank you.
it's always a lot of fun to reflect back, that 2020 vision, how that works. Yeah, Caleb, Lou, thank you very much for sharing. Joe Kramer, excellent job again. We really appreciate your time, and we'll be talking more beans coming up here in the not too distant future, all righty?
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
You bet. Talking Beans is a presentation of BASF.
It's never just been a field. It's a lab where beakers and vials are corn stalks and bean pods. It's 1,000 dinners on 1,000 plates throughout the world. It's the engine of the American economy. It's our survival. It's never been just a field. It's our future. All of ours. Your field is the future. BASF.